Welcome to Sci-Fi Galactic Tales. Please subscribe to your channel where epic adventures across the cosmos come to life. If you love to dive into thrilling stories of distant galaxies, mysterious worlds, and unforgettable characters, then subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share with fellow space explorers. Let us know your favorite part in the comments. Let's start the story. The first thing Sarah felt was the sand. It was warm, gritty, and stuck to her skin like a second layer. Her head throbbed, and her body ached as if she'd been thrown from a moving car. She groaned, forcing her eyes open. Above her, the sky was a brilliant blue, dotted with fluffy white clouds. The sound of waves crashing nearby filled her ears. She blinked, trying to make sense of where she was. The last thing she remembered was the plane, the turbulence, the screams, and then nothing. Sarah sat up slowly, wincing at the sharp pain in her ribs. She looked around, her heart pounding. The beach stretched endlessly in both directions, lined with palm trees and scattered debris. Pieces of the plane were everywhere, seats, luggage, and twisted metal. But there was no one else. No voices, no movement, just the sound of the ocean and the wind rustling through the trees. "Hello," she called out, her voice hoarse and shaky. "Is anyone here?" No answer. She stood on shaky legs, brushing the sand off her torn clothes. Her mind raced as she scanned the wreckage. She was alone, completely alone. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut, and she took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Okay, Sarah," she muttered to herself, her voice trembling. "Focus. Shelter. Food. Water. You can figure this out." She stumbled through the wreckage, her eyes darting from one piece of debris to another. She found a suitcase and pried it open, pulling out a bottle of water and a jacket. She drank the water greedily, her throat burning with relief. The cool liquid soothed her dry mouth, but it did little to calm her nerves. As she explored further, she noticed something strange. The debris was scattered in a perfect circle, as if the plane had exploded mid-air. But there was no fire, no burn marks, just clean, jagged edges. She picked up a piece of metal, turning it over in her hands. It was cold to the touch, almost unnaturally so. She frowned, dropping it back into the sand. "Focus, Sarah," she whispered, shaking her head. "One thing at a time." She grabbed a backpack from the wreckage and started filling it with supplies, a flashlight, a first aid kit, and a few protein bars. As she zipped it up, she noticed something glinting in the sand. She knelt down and brushed the sand away, revealing a small, silver device. It looked like a watch, but there were no buttons or screens, just a smooth, metallic surface. "What are you?" she whispered, slipping it into her pocket. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the beach. Sarah knew she needed to find shelter before it got dark. She slung the backpack over her shoulder and started walking toward the tree line. The jungle loomed ahead, dense and foreboding. She hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and stepped into the shadows. The air was cooler under the trees, and the ground was soft beneath her feet. She moved cautiously, her eyes scanning the underbrush for any signs of danger. The jungle was eerily quiet, the only sound the crunch of leaves under her feet. As she walked, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She glanced over her shoulder, but there was nothing there. Just the trees, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. "Get it together, Sarah," she muttered, gripping the piece of metal tighter. "You're just imagining things." But deep down, she knew something was wrong. The island was too quiet, too still. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the jungle into darkness, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what else was out there. Sarah's heart pounded as she stared at the footprints in the mud. They were large, too large to belong to any animal she knew. The toes were elongated, with deep claw marks at the tips. She crouched down, her fingers hovering over the prints. They were fresh, the edges still sharp and defined. "Okay, Sarah," she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. "This is not good. This is really not good." She stood up slowly, her eyes darting around the jungle. The trees loomed overhead, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. She tightened her grip on the piece of metal she'd been using as a weapon, her knuckles white. "Oh, or what made these?" she muttered, her mind racing. She followed the footprints cautiously, her footsteps soft against the forest floor. The trail led her deeper into the jungle, where the trees grew closer together and the light barely filtered through the canopy. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. After a few minutes, the footprints disappeared into a patch of dense underbrush. Sarah hesitated, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. She pushed through the bushes, her heart pounding in her chest. On the other side, she found herself in a small clearing. In the center was a pond, its water crystal clear and still. The sight of it brought a small measure of relief. She knelt down, cupping the water in her hands and drinking deeply. The cool liquid soothed her parched throat, but it did little to calm her nerves. As she drank, she noticed something strange. The water was unnaturally clear, with no signs of life. No fish, no insects, nothing. She frowned, her eyes scanning the surface. That's when she saw it. On the other side of the pond, partially hidden by the trees, was a structure. It looked like a cabin, but the walls were made of a strange, metallic material that shimmered in the fading light. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "What the?" She stood up slowly, her eyes fixed on the cabin. It looked out of place, as if it didn't belong in the jungle. The walls were smooth and cold, and the air around it smelled faintly of metal and ozone. "Hello," she called out, her voice echoing through the clearing. No answer. She approached the cabin cautiously, her hand gripping the piece of metal like a weapon. The door was slightly ajar, and she pushed it open with her foot. Inside, the cabin was empty. The walls were smooth and cold, and the air smelled faintly of metal and ozone. In the center of the room was a table, and on the table was a single object, a small, black box with a glowing red light. Sarah's heart raced as she stepped closer. The box was about the size of her hand, its surface smooth and featureless except for the pulsing red light. She reached out to touch it, but hesitated. Something about the box felt wrong. "Okay, Sarah," she muttered, her voice trembling. "What are you waiting for? It's just a box." She took a deep breath and touched the box. The moment her fingers made contact, the room filled with a low hum. The walls began to glow, and a voice echoed through the cabin. "Welcome, Sarah." She jumped back, her heart pounding. "Who's there?" The voice was calm and mechanical. "You are not alone. This island is not what it seems." Sarah's mind raced. "What do you mean? Where am I?" The voice continued, ignoring her questions. "You have been chosen. The island is a test. Survive, and you will find the truth." Before she could respond, the voice faded, and the room went dark. The black box's red light flickered and went out. Sarah stood there, her mind racing. Chosen? A test? What was going on? Sarah froze, her breath catching in her throat. The growl was low and guttural, echoing through the trees like a warning. She tightened her grip on the piece of metal, her knuckles white. The jungle seemed to close in around her, the shadows deepening as the sun dipped lower in the sky. "Stay calm," she whispered to herself, though her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her ears. "Just stay calm." The growl came again, closer this time. Sarah's eyes darted around the clearing, searching for the source of the sound. She backed away slowly, her footsteps silent against the soft earth. The cabin was behind her, but she didn't dare turn her back on the jungle. That's when she saw it, a pair of glowing eyes staring at her from the shadows. They were red, like embers in the darkness, and they were moving closer. "Stay back," she whispered, her voice trembling. The creature stepped into the light, and Sarah's breath hitched. It was like nothing she had ever seen, a mix between a wolf and a machine. Its body was covered in sleek, black armor, and its teeth were sharp and metallic. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and its claws scraped against the ground as it moved. Sarah's mind raced. She had no weapons, no way to defend herself. The piece of metal in her hand felt useless against something like this. The creature growled again, its muscles tensing as it prepared to pounce. Sarah didn't wait. She turned and ran, her feet pounding against the forest floor. The creature was right behind her, its growls growing louder with every step. She didn't stop until she reached the beach. The sand slowed her down, but she kept going, her lungs burning. She glanced over her shoulder and saw the creature hesitate at the edge of the jungle. Its glowing eyes watched her for a moment. Then it turned and disappeared into the trees. Sarah collapsed onto the sand, her chest heaving. She stared at the jungle, her mind racing. What kind of place was this? What kind of creature was that? She sat there for a long time, trying to catch her breath. The sun was setting, casting the beach in shades of orange and pink. The ocean stretched out before her, endless and calm. But Sarah knew better. This island was anything but calm. As she sat there, she noticed something glinting in the sand. She reached out and picked it up. It was the silver device she had found earlier. The surface was glowing faintly, and as she turned it over in her hands, she saw words forming on the screen. Asterisk, the island is a test. Survive, and you will find the truth. Asterisk, Sarah's heart raced. She didn't know what the device meant, but she knew one thing. She had to survive. She stood up, brushing the sand off her clothes. The jungle loomed ahead, dark and foreboding. But she couldn't stay on the beach forever. She needed answers, and she wasn't going to find them here. As she walked back toward the jungle, she noticed something strange. The trees seemed to be moving, shifting slightly as if they were alive. She shook her head, trying to clear her mind. "Get it together, Sarah," she muttered. "You're just imagining things." But deep down, she knew something was wrong. The island was changing, and she didn't know how much time she had left. Sarah stood at the entrance of the cave, her heart pounding in her chest. The symbols carved into the stone were unlike anything she had ever seen. Sharp, angular shapes that seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light. The air around the cave was thick with an eerie stillness, as if the jungle itself was holding its breath. She hesitated, her fingers brushing against the cold stone. The silver device in her pocket was glowing brighter now, its light casting strange shadows on the cave walls. She pulled it out, holding it up to the symbols. They matched. "Okay, Sarah," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This is it. Whatever's in there, you need to know." She stepped inside, the darkness swallowing her whole. The cave was narrow at first, the walls closing in around her. But as she moved deeper, it opened up into a large chamber. The air was cool and damp, and the faint hum she had heard in the cabin was louder here, vibrating through the stone. In the center of the chamber was a pedestal, its surface smooth and metallic. On top of it was a slot, perfectly shaped for the device in her hand. Sarah's breath quickened as she approached it, her mind racing with possibilities. "This is it," she muttered, her voice echoing in the chamber. "This has to be it." She placed the device into the slot, and the chamber came alive. The symbols on the walls lit up, glowing with a soft, blue light. The hum grew louder, filling the air with a low, resonant vibration. Then, a hologram appeared in front of her. It was a man dressed in a lab coat. His face was grim, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. "Sarah," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "If you're seeing this, it means you've survived. The island was designed to test humanity's resilience. You were chosen because you are strong. But there is more at stake than you realize." Sarah's heart raced as she listened, her eyes fixed on hologram. "The truth is, the plane crash was no accident. You were brought here for a reason. The island is a test, but it's also a warning. Something is coming, something we couldn't stop. And now, you must decide, will you stay or will you fight?" The hologram flickered, and the man's expression grew darker. "Whatever you choose, know this. You are not alone. The island is watching, and it will test you until the very end." The hologram faded, and the chamber went dark. The device in the slot glowed faintly, its light pulsing like a heartbeat. Sarah stood there, her mind reeling. The man's words echoed in her head, each one more unsettling than the last. She had been chosen. The island was a test, and something was coming. She pulled the device out of the slot, her hands trembling. The symbols on the walls dimmed, and the hum faded into silence. As she turned to leave, she noticed something else, a faint light coming from deeper in the cave. It was soft and golden, unlike the cold blue light of the symbols. Her curiosity piqued. She moved toward it, her footsteps echoing in the chamber. The light grew brighter as she approached, and soon she found herself in a smaller room. In the center was a pedestal, just like the one before. But this time, there was no slot for the device. Instead, there was a small, golden key. Sarah picked it up, her fingers brushing against the intricate carvings on its surface. It was warm to the touch, and as she held it, she felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. But before she could examine it further, she heard a noise behind her, a low growl, followed by the sound of claws scraping against stone. She turned, her heart pounding. The creature from the jungle was standing at the entrance of the chamber, its glowing eyes fixed on her. Sarah's grip tightened around the golden key, her heart pounding as she stared at the creature. Its glowing red eyes locked onto hers, and its metallic claws scraped against the stone floor, sending sparks flying. The low growl rumbling from its throat echoed through the cave, making the walls seem to vibrate. "Stay back," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling but firm. She held the key out in front of her like a weapon, though she had no idea what it could do. The creature took a step forward, its massive body moving with unnatural precision. The key began to glow in her hand, its warmth spreading up her arm. Sarah's eyes widened as the carvings on its surface lit up, casting a golden light across the chamber. The creature hesitated, its head tilting as if confused. "What are you?" Sarah muttered, her voice barely audible. The creature lunged, its claws slashing through the air. Sarah ducked, rolling to the side just in time. She scrambled to her feet, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The key's glow intensified, and she felt a strange pull, as if it was guiding her. "Okay, key," she whispered, clutching it tightly. "If you're going to do something, now's the time." The creature lunged again, but this time, Sarah didn't move. She held the key out in front of her, and as the creature's claws came down, a burst of golden light erupted from it. The creature let out a deafening roar as the light hit it, sending it flying backward into the wall. Sarah stared in shock, her hands still outstretched. The creature lay motionless for a moment, its glowing eyes flickering. Then, with a low growl, it pushed itself up, its armor dented but intact. "Of course," Sarah muttered, backing away. Why would it be that easy? The creature charged again, but this time, Sarah was ready. She dodged to the side, using the key to deflect its claws. The golden light flared with each strike, creating a barrier between her and the creature. But she couldn't keep this up forever. Her arms were already aching, and her legs felt like they were about to give out. She needed a plan, and fast. As the creature lunged again, Sarah spotted something, a narrow passage leading out of the chamber. She didn't know where it went, but it was her only chance. She turned and ran, the creature hot on her heels. The passage was tight, the walls closing in around her as she sprinted through the darkness. The key's glow lit her way, but it also cast eerie shadows on the walls, making the passage feel even more claustrophobic. The creature's growls grew louder, its claws scraping against the stone as it pursued her. Sarah's lungs burned, but she didn't stop. She could see light ahead, faint but growing brighter with every step. She burst out of the passage and into another chamber, this one larger than the last. The walls were covered in more of the strange symbols, and in the center was a pedestal, just like the ones before. But this time there was something on it, a small, glowing orb. Sarah didn't have time to think. She grabbed the orb and turned just as the creature emerged from the passage. Its glowing eyes locked onto her, and it let out a deafening roar. The orb began to pulse in her hand, its light merging with the key's glow. Sarah felt a surge of energy, and without thinking, she raised the key and the orb together. A blinding light filled the chamber, and the creature let out a final, ear-splitting roar before collapsing to the ground. Its body began to dissolve, its metallic armor turning to dust as the light consumed it. Sarah stood there, her chest heaving, the key and orb still glowing in her hands. The chamber was silent, the only sound her ragged breathing. But as the light faded, she noticed something else. The symbols on the walls were changing, shifting into a new pattern. And in the center of the chamber, a door began to open. Sarah stood frozen, staring at the portal. The air around it shimmered like heat waves, distorting the view of what lay beyond. She could see a vast, dark landscape, barren and lifeless, with jagged mountains cutting into a blood-red sky. The ground was cracked and dry, and in the distance, she could see strange, towering structures that looked like they were made of bone. Her heart pounded in her chest, her grip tightening on the key and the orb. The symbols on the walls pulsed faintly, as if urging her forward. But every instinct in her body screamed at her to turn back. "This can't be real," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This has to be some kind of trick." But the portal was real. She could feel the energy radiating from it, a low hum that vibrated through her bones. The air smelled metallic like blood and ozone, and it made her stomach churn. The key in her hand glowed brighter, its light merging with the orb's. She felt a strange pull, as if the portal was calling to her. "Okay, Sarah," she muttered, taking a deep breath. "You've come this far. You can't stop now." She stepped through the portal, the air around her shifting and warping. For a moment, she felt weightless, as if she was floating in darkness. Then, her feet hit solid ground, and the world came into focus. The landscape was even more unsettling up close. The ground was cracked and dry, with veins of glowing red liquid running through it like rivers of fire. The air was thick and heavy, making it hard to breathe, and the towering structures in the distance loomed over her, their jagged edges cutting into the sky. Sarah's heart raced as she took it all in. This wasn't just another part of the island. This was something else entirely. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The key and orb in her hands pulsed faintly, their light casting long shadows on the ground. She looked down and noticed something strange. The glowing red liquid in the ground seemed to be moving, flowing toward her. She took a step back, her breath quickening. The liquid pooled around her feet, forming intricate patterns that matched the symbols in the cave. "Okay, this is bad," she muttered, her voice shaking. "This is really, really bad." She turned to run, but the liquid surged forward, wrapping around her ankles like vines. She tried to pull free, but it was too strong. The glowing red tendrils climbed higher, their heat searing her skin. "Let go!" she shouted, slashing at the tendrils with the key. The golden light flared, cutting through the liquid and freeing her legs. She stumbled back, her chest heaving. The liquid recoiled, retreating into the cracks in the ground. But it didn't disappear completely. It lingered, pulsing faintly, as if waiting for the right moment to strike again. Sarah's mind raced. She couldn't stay here. She needed to find a way out. But as she looked around, she realized there was no way back. The portal was gone, leaving her stranded in this nightmarish landscape. The key and orb glowed brighter, their light merging into a single beam that pointed toward the towering structures in the distance. "Of course," Sarah muttered, her voice filled with frustration. "Why would it be easy?" She started walking, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The ground crunched beneath her feet, and the air grew heavier with every step. The structures loomed closer, their jagged edges casting long shadows over the landscape. As she approached, she noticed something else: movement. Shadows shifted in the distance, their forms indistinct but unmistakably alive. Sarah's heart pounded as she gripped the key and orb tighter. Whatever was out there, she wasn't ready to face it, but she didn't have a choice. Sarah's fingers brushed against the glowing cube, and the void around her shifted. The endless white space dissolved, replaced by a familiar sight, the beach where she had first awakened. The sand was warm beneath her feet, the ocean waves crashing gently against the shore. But something was different. The jungle was gone, replaced by a vast, open landscape. And in the distance, she saw something that made her heart stop. A city, not the ruins she had explored earlier, but a thriving, futuristic city. Towering skyscrapers gleamed in the sunlight, their surfaces reflecting the blue sky. Vehicles zipped through the air, and people walked along pristine streets. It was a stark contrast to the island she had just escaped. Sarah stared in disbelief, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. What is this?" The voice from the void spoke again, calm and steady. "This is the truth, Sarah. The island was a simulation, a test to prepare you for what lies ahead." "A simulation?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "None of it was real. Not in the way you think," the voice replied. "The island was designed to push you to your limits, to see if you were ready for the next step. And you passed." Sarah's heart raced as she took a step toward the city. Ready for what? What's the next step? The voice paused, as if choosing its words carefully. "The world you see before you is real, but it is in danger." The plane crash, the island, the creatures, they were all part of a larger plan. A plan to find someone who could save us. "Save you?" Sarah repeated, her voice rising. "From what?" The ground beneath her feet began to tremble, and the sky darkened. The city in the distance flickered, its gleaming towers replaced by crumbling ruins. The ocean turned black, and the air grew heavy with the scent of decay. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "What's happening?" "The danger is real," the voice said, its tone urgent now. "The island was a test, but the threat is not. You have been chosen, Sarah. You are the only one who can stop it." The cube in her hand pulsed brighter, its light merging with the keys. Sarah felt a surge of energy, and for the first time, she understood. The island, the creatures, the portal, it had all been leading to this moment. She looked down at the cube, her hands trembling. "What do I need to do?" The voice grew softer, almost a whisper. "The cube holds the key. Use it to unlock the truth. But be warned, once you do, there is no turning back. Sarah took a deep breath, her mind racing. She had come this far. She couldn't stop now. She pressed the cube into the key's slot, and the world around her exploded in light. The city, the ruins, the ocean, everything dissolved into a swirling vortex of energy. Sarah felt herself being pulled into it, her body weightless as the light consumed her. When she opened her eyes, she was standing in a vast, circular chamber. The walls were covered in the same symbols she had seen before, and in the center was a massive, glowing machine. A man stood in front of it, his back to her. He turned, and Sarah's breath caught her throat. It was the man from the hologram. "Welcome, Sarah," he said, his voice calm but filled with urgency. "You've done well, but the real fight is just beginning." Sarah stepped forward, her heart pounding. "What is this? What's going on?" The man gestured to the machine. "This is the heart of it all. The island, the simulation, the creatures, they were all part of a plan to prepare you. The world is in danger, Sarah, and you are the only one who can save it." Sarah's mind raced as she stared at the machine. "What I need to do?" The man smiled faintly. "You already know. The key, the orb, the cube, they were all pieces of the puzzle. Now, it's up to you to put them together." Sarah looked down at the key in her hand, its light merging with the cube's. She took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "Let's finish this." If you enjoyed the story and want to watch more thrilling sci-fi adventures, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Dive into epic battles, explore distant galaxies, and join brave heroes as they fight for survival against impossible odds. Don't miss out on the next chapters. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and become part of the journey. Together, we'll keep the last light burning. Subscribe now and let the adventure continue.